the most important relationship all of us have in our own lives is with ourselves. If you want that story to change, then you have to be willing to get out of your own comfort zone. You know, we can live a very good life that also doesn't have a great deal of pollution and a great deal of driving the whole planet out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be achievable. It's possible. I grew up in a very small town in Minnesota, a very beautiful place on a lake with a lot of agriculture, and I have a family whose background was in farming, a father who decided to change into working for a municipality in water treatment. And so these kinds of topics, these sort of topics that are related to nature, that are related to and I think as I grew up and as I started in high school and in my university degree, looking at topics that really connect everyone at sort of a fundamental level, demand for energy, the demand for electricity globally is going to grow incredibly in the next years. I mean, this is a trend that, you know, especially you mentioned AI, that beyond artificial intelligence, if we're talking about super intelligence or all these levels of how this computing capacity and how this will develop, it needs a source. You need a source to run these algorithms.
But I think now from today's wisdom that I have, it's good to give a shit, to care about something. Yeah, and not to live, you know.
Will that be the headline of this podcast then? Giving shit to Edward Feltmann.
For this podcast, I would suggest that we pick a line that you said, not me.
From a perspective of sustainability or looking at the impacts of how our lives are on other people, you know, I think, you know, if you're sitting there without regrets, maybe you did something.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive Podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.
Hello and welcome back, Recursive community. We're here in Vienna during their annual startup festival called ViennaUp. And I'm super excited because finally, I have my next guest, Edward Feltmann. And we have been discussing, I think, for the past 2 years that we would love to sit together, and do a podcast series. And finally, the moment came. But who is he? A strategic investment leader with a focus on sustainable energy innovation. Currently serving as the investment and deal sourcing manager at VERBUND X Ventures, where you lead investment in early stage European climate tech startups.
Yes.
You're also a board observer at NECTURE.
That's right.
Where you support innovative teams that drive technology and impact forward. Edward,
that's a lot.
That you're here.
Wow.
There is much more.
Wow.
Actually, for the first time, I really took the time to go through your career path so far, and I found it very interesting because there were like a lot of turns and a lot of travels also across oceans.
That's there too. I think this is also the first time someone's actually like looked at my CV for real. So let's see let's see. I'm feeling maybe a little vulnerable at the moment, but it will be very fun.
Yeah, we know each other, or we've been knowing each other for the past, how many, probably
2 or 3 years, I think.
2 or 3 years.
At least, yeah.
And I know a bit more about your personal story back then in the States, in Minnesota, right?
That's right. Yes, but I'm a long way from home here in Vienna.
A long way from home. And I have always asked you what brought you here, but I never really knew that you have a very long career in finance so far.
That's right.
And actually, you have been being in such kind of positions through very different lens. So I wonder how, first of all, you found your own way to the topic of sustainability, because before that you were serving a very different industry.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that, well, I mean, back once upon a time, right? I think we can. Hi, anyway, by the way, it's really nice to do this with you. So, and, you know, this comes from childhood. I would say that, you know, I grew up in a very small town in Minnesota, a very beautiful place on a lake with a lot of agriculture, and I have a family whose background was in farming, a father who decided to change into working for a municipality in water treatment. And so these kinds of topics, these sort of topics that are related to nature, that are related to, and I think as I grew up and as I started in high school and in my university degree, looking at topics that really connect everyone at sort of a fundamental level were really fascinating to me. So sustainability is clearly one of those, because we're all on this beautiful little blue planet together for a long ride, hopefully a very long ride. Topics regarding energy, electricity were very interesting to me, and my bachelor's degree is actually in environmental science. Getting into finance is probably the follow-up question.
Yes.
How did that happen? Yeah.
No, I just saw that you started your career through, or at least one of your positions were here in Europe, but then you moved to New York.
Yes, yes.
And you took the challenge of managing corporate credit for the North American oil and gas industry and also metals, which, as we know, are not
yes.
part of, or they, how to put it? They needed to do, and still need to do, an enormous transition in terms of their business models, so that they actually kind of like comply with the sustainability visions that we have now formulated, at least in the Western world.
Sure.
So how did
that happen?
Yeah, how did that happen?
Well, my master's degree is probably a little bit of the key to that, because I moved from Minnesota to New York to do my master's degree in international affairs, but the focus of that was actually a lot in finance. I had the energy part that I still was very compelling and interesting to me, in the finance part. I wanted to combine these.
Yeah.
And the jobs that were available in 2001, when I finished that degree, this was around the dot-com bubble era. There was, I think, going out and finding a sustainable finance job at that time was not exactly on the radar.
Yeah.
So it made sense to have, these initial jobs, really understanding the oil and gas and the overall energy industry. Most of the companies that I was helping to manage credit for and doing corporate finance for were actually utilities in the US.
Yeah.
So it's not such a big stretch from VERBUND.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned those in previous interviews, and I know that also from knowing you, that sustainability is a sort of is very connected to your personal credo.
Yes.
And I think for many of us, it should be this way. This is how we should behave, because this is how, I don't know, it became acceptable. But how do you practice what you preach?
I was afraid of this question.
Yes.
No, look, I think fundamentally, again, just talking about sources and roots, I think I was raised always to try to leave things better than you found them. Meaning that if there's something that you can improve, there's something you can do that makes quality, mostly qualitatively better, makes sense. And for me, I think this notion about sustainability, that we can live a very good life that also doesn't have a great deal of pollution and a great deal of driving the whole planet out of balance. This has to be achievable. It's possible. We have so much, in my years, both privately and professionally, I've just seen people with so much talent and such good ideas. I think making things more sustainable and considering what our planetary boundaries and how to, have a very good and a full sense of life and purpose can be done in a way, I think, that leaves something better for our kids, leaves something better for the generations after us.
Yeah. And I think you were kind of lucky to have found a company that is also very committed to sustainability goals and also to practicing what they preach, VERBUND.
Yes.
And that was the other thing that surprised me, that I didn't know that your journey with VERBUND started actually a long time ago.
Yes, yes. A little time ago.
Yes, a little time ago, already 2007, to what my research showed. Is it correct? Yes.
Spoiler alert, I've been here for a while in Vienna. Most of this story is actually taken place here. And I actually moved from New York to Vienna in 2005.
Aren't people doing that the other way around? I mean, come on.
Well, if you make it there, you can make it anywhere.
You can make it
Come
anywhere.
on.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank. No, I mean, I have to be honest, I moved here for private reasons.
Yes.
And I knew that after my initial experience in corporate finance and in banking, in the North American energy sort of ecosystem, that when I moved here to Vienna, I was really looking for an opportunity that stayed in energy, but was not in banking anymore. And through a lot of serendipity and a lot of luck, I ended up with my first position at VERBUND. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have seen also the company evolving their own strategy and also their own approach to innovation and how they want to be at the pulse of what is up and coming in energy transition. And
Yes. Yeah.
what I find interesting about energy transition is, and also innovation in this space, that it's not only about being committed to leaving the planet better as we found it, but it is also about very viable business opportunities.
Sure.
So solving energy transition and also finding sustainable and maybe even more efficient ways for us to have energy goes hand in hand with the AI revolution that we're going through right now, because otherwise we cannot fuel this revolution.
The fact is that the demand for energy, the demand for electricity globally is going to grow incredibly in the next years. I mean, this is a trend that, especially you mentioned AI, that beyond artificial intelligence, if we're talking about super intelligence or all these levels of how this computing capacity and how this will develop, it needs a source. You need a source to run these algorithms. You need a source to store all of this data, and energy is a fundamental part of it. So if this is the case, and we understand also, especially in Europe, geopolitical circumstances that are going on, sustainability and having more sources of renewable energy are vital. They're essential. Probably nuclear power is too, although we're in Austria and I work for a company that's not in nuclear power. So if I say things about that, I am not speaking on behalf of VERBUND. So, but I think we need to use all these sources, but it's clear due to how carbon-based energy production works, there's a problem there. And we can do more, I think, to fuel this future and drive innovation through renewables and through sustainability.
What kind of opportunities are now opening up for countries like Austria, but by the way also for countries like Bulgaria?
Yes.
And because I was looking yesterday at the map of the cities and also the countries that have been given the mandate to build an AI gigafactory.
Yes.
And I think this is like a major endeavor. It's going to be like a game changer. But in order for an economy to facilitate this kind of facility, it requires a lot of energy. It requires also a lot of conditions which are more on the infrastructure. And then we can speak about the innovation that can happen from these factories. So what is the opportunity for the energy sector here in Austria, the way that you see it, and maybe the way that you actually also discuss it in VERBUND?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, you mentioned before about the luck of VERBUND. VERBUND is almost a 100% renewable energy company as it stands now anyway. And that that strategy will not change. I think the goal is to have even more of a generation base with wind and solar and hydropower. The part that maybe gets interesting, which is not so viable at the moment, is green hydrogen. And how that maybe will play into the energy infrastructure of Europe and globally in the future is quite interesting. In VERBUND, green hydrogen is one of the strategic objectives or part of the strategic goals of the company, to develop both a system of transporting and having the proper infrastructure to bring green hydrogen into Austria. But I think we also, on the production side, I think we also play a role. And I think these are, if I put my European hat on, which I've been here long enough, I think maybe I can have an honorary one. But I think these are the challenges, or these are the opportunities for Europe as it stands to differentiate itself, at least on an energy perspective, through non-carbon based fuels.
Yeah.
That might not be what everyone wants to hear, but I think things that have happened recently in the last years, and especially in the last months, geopolitically, and looking at things like the Draghi report that was produced last year, really kind of create and show a map and a path towards how Europe can play on a global stage now and in the next years and in the future.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be probably challenging for me to lead a really informed geopolitical discussion with you.
Oh, please don't. We don't. And it would be very difficult for me to follow up.
Exactly. Although at the same time, so it's interesting times that we live in, because I think geopolitically we have a very little transparency of what's really going on. There is, in my opinion, a lot of disinformation and propaganda, and it's hard to understand what is really happening anywhere. And at the same time, I'm asking myself, would you be able to do your job if you're not, informed about these kind of topics? Because now they become a question of sovereignty. They become strategically important angles that the country need to consider while they enter like this new phase of, geopolitical balance. Yeah. So, in the sense, what kind of opportunities lie for the energy sector and also for innovators in this space if we think about energy from a sovereignty perspective? Yeah.
Energy from a serenity perspective.
Well, we need to
be... No, of course. No.
Yeah, after, for instance, the fallout that we experienced, I think, a couple of weeks ago, where was it? In Spain.
Yeah. This is what you mean. Okay. We can get out our crystals and talk about our chakras too. Know what I mean? But I think the things. Spain is a very interesting example. VERBUND has significant operations in Spain. We have been growing. In the last few years, we've been growing out a significant renewable portfolio. So we're building and buying solar farms in Spain as well as wind.
Wow. Okay.
And funny enough, that is one of the topics where we as VERBUND Ventures and myself as a corporate venture capital professional can play a role, and we actively are playing a role right now.
Okay.
One thing that's very important to ensure, say, grid stability and energy serenity or energy resilience in regions like that. And by the way, we also, the local transmission company in Spain has not fully disclosed and they're still investigating what exactly happened.
Yeah.
But I think we can make some conclusions that when you have more and more renewable energy sources, they're intermittent. Sometimes the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. And the topic of energy storage, the topic of having a lot of batteries on the ground or using pump storage, hydropower, and using a lot more innovative technologies to create more stability, to create more resilience, is exactly what we're looking at and doing.
Okay.
And I can't reveal it entirely right now, but we as VERBUND Ventures have made, I think, a very interesting and an investment in a Spanish startup company that I'm really excited about. And it definitely supports our colleagues that are in Spain and our colleagues here in Vienna that are working on energy storage solutions and balancing energy. It's something that we can also play a role, even from a venture capital perspective.
Because most of our audience is probably in Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, so I think 25% are still somewhere over the seas and also in the UK, but the majority are still based in Central and Eastern Europe. And as we know, Bulgaria, Romania, the neighboring countries, we are very bad at energy efficiency. which is also a market niche. So I think there is a lot that we can do. There is a lot that we can innovate, maybe build also greenfield. How do you approach Central and Eastern Europe in terms of investment? Is it a region that is interesting for you, and what would you be looking at? Yeah, where do you see most of the opportunities for VERBUND X?
Sure. We're very, very, well, first of all, I'm a very big fan of the region, as I think you well know. And VERBUND Ventures has been active for looking at investments east of Austria, south of Austria, and in all directions in Europe. Actually, we have two investments in our portfolio in the region. We are invested in a Romanian company called Ogre AI and a Slovenian company called Reduxi. So we're not strangers to the region. We are actively and will continue to look at opportunities there. I was lucky enough today at an earlier conference to meet quite a few different companies from Bulgaria, from Croatia, and so on. I think, of course, there's opportunities there. And of course, if the energy, let's say, infrastructure is not as renewable as in other regions, that's I'd see it more as an opportunity. There's probably two roles there to play though too. I mean, sometimes people really like their old cars, or they like things that are operating as they are and don't want to change things. I totally understand that. And I think also that there's probably maybe two components of that transition though. One is some things do require, I think, active change, and some things need to happen that are somehow passive, that just general improvements in efficiency or how things operate that don't necessarily have a visible or a notable impact on people's normal lives as they are now. I think there has to be both. I think it's a lot to ask anyone anywhere change your whole lifestyle because you know if your car goes broom broom, or it's not silent and produced by some interesting fellows in the US, that and it's that you need to change that. I think and getting back to your question though, we're very interested in investing all over Europe, and especially in Central and Southern Europe.
Are there specific challenges which you kind of like feel are the most pressing one that for which we have not found solutions yet? Problems that you would like to see solved by a company, hopefully in your portfolio and not anti-portfolio.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I think that kind of gets to like what we are looking at these days. I think we already mentioned before, I'm looking very much, and our team's looking very much at the topics of energy storage and flexibility and sort of getting on top of this whole issue because, it is part of the whole value chain. It's part of the whole solutions that we're looking at. I would, and it's also just personally, I would love to see better solutions in mobility that are really making it easier for people to adopt electric cars or electric vehicles, because I also understand that there's a lot of resistance. One of my best friends collects classic cars, and we have many interesting conversations. He doesn't like it when I tell him that he could convert out the his old engines for electric battery cars. This is not I'm not making him necessarily happy about that. So, but it's all in good fun, and I think sooner or later, if this topic of green hydrogen is really a legitimate alternative to fossil fuels, and being, having an industrial impact, having a true impact, a lot of work still needs to be done there to really commercialize it and make it viable.
Do you have some kind of like a prognosis of when would that be possible? Because we know that it is possible, but how fast do you see it realistically being adopted, especially in the corporate world?
Well, whatever number I give you, I'm sure you could probably add quite a few more years to it, unfortunately.
Okay.
I would say that you have a very established system of how global energy politics and how global energy flows work. We've seen quite recently certain companies in certain countries kind of going back against, of course, the pendulums, as we are all aware, at least in the short term, pendulums are swinging in certain directions. I think it requires both political determination and also some of these larger existing players to really also will be a part of this future. If there really, say, for example, is a legitimate green hydrogen market in the future, the Saudis will be involved, the Russians will be involved, America will be involved. I think the existing larger players in oil and gas will have to play a role as well, and not just a greenwashing one, an actual one.
Do you think this is also one of the reasons why we're experiencing it as going back of the pendulum? I think with certain events that were in the States, and I'm actually curious. Do you still have friends in the States? Most probably, yeah.
When are you moving back to the US?
I'm not moving back.
When are you going there? No, of course. I mean, of course, my family and dear friends are still back home in Minnesota, in New York, and all over the place.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you where they are on the political spectrum, but as we know, part of the Republicans' agenda was kind of like to bash against the whole Green Deal and all the commitment that we have made to the SDGs, and
sure.
They consider that some kind of like fluffy theory of the future, something which, at least in our European world, is very realistic.
Yeah.
And I wonder, how do you manage this kind of like discrepancy in the worldviews?
Well, it's always been here. It's not going away, and it won't in the future either. And I think, we could, and maybe another discussion, can talk about how the polarity in political views, depending on where you are in the world.
Do you think that this kind of politics is actually instrumentalizing the topic to reach like different goals? Like maybe we have also reached a certain level of greenwashing and green scaring people. I don't know how to call it. That at some point it was easy for this topic to be instrumentalized, so that you can kind of like mobilize people through some kind of like hate against this kind of trend.
You mean it's instrumental? It's instrumentalized.
It's like at some point it was like too green. We were like too we wanted to be too sustainable. The scenarios that we have pictured of the future were maybe too dark, and people just didn't want to go with it. They needed like a different approach to the topic, so they started kind of like hating it.
Sure. I mean, I think I think this is a multiple layer question or topic, right? I mean, on one level, it can be if we have team 1 and team 2, wherever we are, and team 1 is really in favor of a pro-environmental policy, team 2 naturally is going to have some issues with that and be able to sort of instrumentalize against that when they're the incumbent power, or to poke holes in it, or if at any moment environmental policies are seen as affecting the economy in a negative way, or people's normal budgets every month, or things like this. These are easy, I think. Yeah, of course you can use this as targets to identify or put a tag on team 1 or team 2, depending on the topic, that can maybe change people's minds. I mean, the other topic too is that, I think it's another big one, but I think it should be mentioned too, is that we're getting also to the bigger topic of, is the global economic system that we have in place the best one that we can have in the future, right? Nobody needs to really go through that right now, but I think we don't, it's not our role, let's say, to play as VERBUND Ventures to talk about other things like degrowth and impact. I mean, impact investing, I think, is something we really look at, but that topic is a little bit of a loaded word too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in general, a lot of the things that are, it's easy if you're externalizing something to get a better price or a cheaper price for something. and those externalities are not dealt with or managed in the future. And so I think policies right now that are shifting more towards, say, for example, oil production or oil and gas production, are trying to eliminate certain costs that still need to be paid at some point.
Yeah. Will be paid probably by future generations. But I find it interesting, that
sooner, yeah.
Maybe because I see you very much also as an American, and I'm thinking maybe you're able to understand, the differences in the mindset. I wonder when you just go back and when you kind of share about your work and about your beliefs, to what extent your friends and your circles there would see you as, you're so European.
Well, first and foremost,
almost like delusionally European about sustainability. Do they see us this way?
Sure. Well,
yeah.
First of all, I am definitely still very much a proud American, and I will keep my passport as till someone makes me give it back. I hope that the answer's never. And I think being an American living in Europe for many years does provide a lot of insights and is an interesting perspective. And you are right, when I go home, that's a funny role to live in Vienna. I somehow sound very American, but my German sounds also very American, like, I don't know, reverse Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. And when I go back home to Minnesota or anywhere where I visit, of course, I don't sound as American as I used to. My accent has definitely been affected by this, probably my mindset or even how I look or how I perceive the world. Granted, it's also been 20 years. People grow and change regardless. Yeah. I think maybe just to answer the question is it's so important to make sure that you have real conversations in person with people, right? Of all walks of life.
True.
And I have plenty of friends back home who are voted for Trump and are Republicans, and we talk about everything. And I don't consider myself Democrat or Republican. That's also a very popular American position, I would say, to be independent. I think both parties have their issues and their problems, and some things that, and I don't necessarily disagree with all of one or the other. If people really don't interact with each other, that's where problems happen. And I think if Americans and Europeans don't talk to each other, really sit down and have conversations like this, maybe not with cameras around, but I think that's getting to some of the problem, or solving some of the problem. We lose a lot when we're having only communications online or reading from whatever media sources or however you get your information. There is a lot to that.
Unfortunately, I think we strengthen our confirmation biases, and we stay more and more in our bubbles. And the way that communications are happening through the different platforms, this is just going worse. I'm trying to figure out to what extent, for instance, my ChatGPT, with memory switched on, is also kind of like pushing me more and more into my own bubble, into my own confirmation biases. And to what extent can we maybe start thinking of platforms and systems that are challenging a bit your worldview? Otherwise, you start believing that everyone around you is just like you, and you're always right, and you get much more emotion about certain topics and extreme, and it's a spiral.
Well, and now we may be entering the self-help part of this discussion. I don't know. It's possible.
I guess you've been listening to my podcast before.
I don't.
There are episodes like this. I'm sorry for that.
No, that's quite fine. I've done my homework. I've done a lot of growth and healing over the years.
That over the past year, the usage of ChatGPT has leaned much more towards exactly companionship and probably also shrinking in a sense than it was before. Before that, we would use it like a year or 2 years ago, we would use it much more as a creativity companion or sparring partner. Now we share much more about our personal life with it.
That makes sense to me, right? Yeah. I think we, well, if we step back for a second to talk about your first topic, is the most important relationship all of us have in our own lives is with ourselves.
And the most important story that we tell ourselves is the one that we tell to ourselves.
And so, if that follows, if you want that story to change, then you have to be willing to get out of your own comfort zone. And I think a lot of the tools that we have out there are, you know, and a lot of the things that we do in our life are based on comfort. We all, I mean, of course. And so I think those things about why people maybe get into their own confirmation bias and their own sound loops has something to do with that. I mean, I think it is, maybe there are ways that these tools can also be used to nudge people out of their comfort zones. Yeah. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there with great ideas about it, and that need to be found and identified, and this needs to be integrated. But if the trend is that ChatGPT is going towards a lot more towards companionship or asking questions about purpose or mental well-being, it's not surprising to me, because we're all looking for relationships, and we're all looking for answers to what's going on in our lives. And if these algorithms, if these tools are helpful in that sense, okay, maybe they can supplement having, you know, people going and talking with career counselors or going to therapy or things like this. I don't think they're not compatible. I don't think they're incompatible.
Actually, I think that they're very compatible, and I'm also not surprised, because I think also the first time that we have developed something similar to ChatGPT, and that was, I think, already back then, when, in the 90s and the 80s, the first computers where you could actually just talk to, people started using it exactly for that. They started sharing their problems.
Sure.
So that's not the surprising part for me. And there's actually nothing surprising. The only thing that I see right now as relevant is more like a warning sign that as soon as we let these systems go so close, come so close to us, they kind of tap into the narrative that we ourselves are developing about life and about ourselves, and that's a very important narrative. That's, if you could say, that's the code of humans. It's the narrative, I do believe in the storytelling part. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think it's an essential part of what we are as humans. And now we have systems who have cracked this code. So if there is nudging happening in whatever direction, it is going to be potentially dangerous. I don't know who is going to instrumentalize it for their own purposes.
Sure.
You know, it's like, you know. Sure. So this is what worries me, and we are social creatures. We would treat these systems as if they are part of our social groups. Yeah. I don't know if we are.
I mean, they are already. I mean, there's something called social media. You know, I mean, I think.
No, now ChatGPT becomes your friend.
Well, we've been talking. This has been in movies and in popular culture already for years. Yes. You know, and I think, a couple of things to think about this. Number one is, we should make the distinction between artificial intelligence and artificial wisdom.
Yeah. How do you define wisdom in general? Then please give me a definition of artificial wisdom.
Oh goodness! I think I might skip that question. Maybe I should know a thing or two about wisdom after all these years. But I would say that. Look,
any day now.
Okay, Ed, come on. Thanks. I think no. Well, I mean, wisdom has a lot to do with your ethics and your sense of, and your experiences, and knowing how to apply the knowledge that you have. And I think in the way that hopefully is for the greater good and meaningful, and it again goes back to purpose. But too many words that we can also define for the rest of the day.
True.
My point is with all these tools, ChatGPT and all the other ones that are around and to come, how they're programmed and what are the rules and the parameters in them are, I think, very critical. What is the objective of trying to build them? And what happens when these intelligence levels surpass ours, which is going to happen much sooner rather than later, and how that's all going to affect us. Clearly as for myself and for us as adults, but as a father of teenagers, I am very, very curious about how all these things become a part of life and will change the world, change the idea of sustainability, change all of these things. So it's not a small topic. Maybe just to finish, I mean, and maybe to your listeners who don't know, I think there's some really important thinkers out there about this. One in particular is Daniel Schmachtenberger, an American. I don't read him enough, I don't listen to him enough, but I think he has some very interesting things to say about this.
I don't know him. Can you maybe?
I think he's. Oh, Daniel, sorry, I'm gonna probably butcher his background, but I think he's an American, really American thinker and intellectual that is talking a lot about sustainability topics, talking a lot about social media topics. I think he's been working on something called the Consilience Project for quite a few years. It's a close cousin, the recursive, perhaps, in concept and thinkings. But
I would be curious to see.
There are, I think, people who are talking a lot more about what are, developing artificial intelligence is one thing, but what is the wisdom, what is the intention behind it, and what are the implications?
I find it in general a bit problematic that we started using very early on all these words that would describe usually human qualities like, smart and intelligence. We started using them for the machines, and they're going to be evolving more and more, and I feel like we're running out of words at this point. And at the same time, while we're trying to understand our own neural networks so that we can kind of apply them better onto machines, we are trying to figure out what a human is, what is it that differentiates us, and we still don't know. We call these intelligent systems, and at the same time, I think there is a certain black box when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to consciousness, that we still cannot figure out what it is and where it is and how does it work and how did it came to be? When do we get it? Do we get it from birth, or is it actually or before that? Does it end with that?
You didn't get it at birth? What happened?
Well,
what happened?
I'm not even sure that, there are different theories. I mean, there are also, theories which are saying that it continues after death.
Exactly. So, maybe we all just turn into trees afterwards and just stay in place.
Or mushrooms. Anyway.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I find this exciting that the more we work on those systems and the more we try to make them even more effective and more efficient, the more we figure out about ourselves. And maybe then we will start using different words which are not connected or which we don't use to describe humans usually, like, as I mentioned, smart, intelligent, and so on and so forth.
Maybe we need these tools to actually answer all the questions that you just asked about the more that this is,
yes,
this is part of progress, or however we want to define it today. I think what seems abundantly clear is, we're not going to turn back the clock on all of these things. They are in motion, they're accelerating, and I think how they can fit into maybe how they can improve and make a more holistic system. I'm not entirely convinced that the topic of expanding computing capacity and solving more and more complex problems this way and having these systems develop is necessarily evil or a bad thing or going to ruin us all.
Oh, I don't.
I think we should be a little bit careful with that. But we have to be, I think, very aware of some consequences and some possibilities.
I think we definitely need to approach this kind of progress in a more responsible way. than we are maybe right now seeing, because I find it problematic when policy makers and political decision makers are not aware of what AI actually is and what kind of potential it would bring, and what kind of effect it would have on, you know, our economy, on our society. And given maybe, I don't know, the way that I listen to them talking, I don't think that they understand what they're talking about. And at the same time, they're the ones who are going to impose, or assert certain policies, which we need in order for us, you know, to go onto this path in a responsible way.
Sure. To be fair, and I don't need to give any politicians an out on any topics, but AI, artificial intelligence, what is the definition? There's a broad set of definitions for all these things. But I think you're getting to the point that it's important that we think about what are the guardrails for all these things and what are the boundaries, and, you know, are there any or you know, can people who are not properly informed about them make good policy?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But for now, I'm calm because I don't see this AI revolution happening as long as you guys in the energy sector don't do your job.
That was a long walk getting back to this. Very impressive. Oh yes, we're talking about energy today.
We were talking about energy. It was interesting.
And we're back.
Let's go home. Yes.
Yeah.
So energy. Let me think of, you know, the topics that we still haven't discussed when it comes to energy. You're also running the VERBUND X, or you're involved in the VERBUND X Accelerator. And here you are trying, or at least you're actually successfully doing it, doing that in partnership with other corporate partners.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you tell me, what are you trying to achieve there? Like, what is the goal, and what have you seen working over the years that you're now trying maybe to dabble on the next batch?
Sure.
Which were the learnings so far?
Well, the VERBUND X Accelerator is fun. I take a lot of ownership for it. It feels a lot like it's my baby. So I'm not the only parent, but and this year is the 5-year anniversary of starting that program. Very cool to see how it's grown and thrived and how it's changed. When we started at VERBUND, there's always been a lot of activities and interaction with startups, but when we kind of comprehensively put together both sort of the VERBUND X Accelerator and VERBUND Ventures 6 years ago, or we really were conceptualizing this, the idea was, number one, we wanted to provide startups and working with startups as a service to the entire company of VERBUND, all departments. Wow. Another tool in the toolbox if people want to use it to solve problems, to look at opportunities. So that means that in principle, our duty, or I feel our service as within the VERBUND X Accelerator and within working with startups is to try to help any business unit anywhere in VERBUND to work together with startups if that's what they want to do.
Okay.
I thought because this program started during the pandemic as well, remember that? Remember that?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
The original program, the first batch of the accelerator was supposed to launch in March of 2020. We realized, I'd say even I think before that, and definitely during some of the lockdowns and during the first batch, that we wanted the program to be a lot more than just working with VERBUND. That we thought that it was also maybe an opportunity for our business units to create more of a broader ecosystem in energy and infrastructure.
Okay.
To actually also provide and give a better offer to startups that wanted to work with us. You know, that wasn't just us, that there could be additional partners there, that there was room for co-creation or collaborating between different European industrials and companies together with different startups. So we wanted, I mean, it was by design. We wanted that to it was also an experiment. I mean, we'd seen it work. There have been other accelerators that were all energy companies or all agriculture companies or all X companies. But we said we want to make sure it's multiple industrial sectors and verticals and see if this experiment could work.
Yeah.
I think it has, in the sense that, I think we've made meaningful connections with startups and business units in our company and with other companies. I hope we've helped a lot of startups to sort of grow and flourish or learn valuable lessons.
How many
Hopefully not too painful.
Yeah.
How
many
batches?
batches?
My colleague Lisa is going to kill me how many batches we've done so far.
Okay.
I think we've done 7. I think the 8th one is coming.
Okay.
Please correct me. Maybe we have to do an edit on that one. I don't know.
No, I won't pull it against you.
Yeah.
Just to get a sense.
But we've had that's and the
Okay.
next batch is coming up later this year, second half of the year.
Okay. And how many corporate partners are you right now?
It's always open and always fluctuates.
Yes. So it's depending probably on the case that they want to see.
Sometimes it
solved.
depends on case.
Okay.
Sometimes it just depends on the needs of other corporate partners or other institutional partners. Sometimes we try to kind of have, different use cases and focus areas. So it goes from time to time. I think there are some partners that have been there consistently over the years, and new ones can come and go. That was the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the accelerator is serving the role of the also translator, the dolmetscher between the two worlds.
Dolmetscher.
Yeah.
Ah.
No, I love this word.
Yeah, it is a good one.
It is a bit of a the gatekeeper, but in both directions. And I can totally imagine that there needs to be someone who is translating between the two worlds, because startups and corporates, they speak different languages. They have a very different culture.
Yeah.
I remember some years ago we were making these funny videos where we would kind of exchange the role of the startup founder with a corporate manager, and for a day they need to be in the shoes of the other. But they
That sounds like fun.
Yes. I mean, environment is very different, but when you see, it boils down to the same challenges partially. Yeah, you're still, internally, and you're trying to sell your idea to the world, and it's just a different mindset that you're faced with every now and then.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, 100%. I think also that, but there's a transformative experience in that as well, because I think maybe sometimes startups that are looking to work with corporate players or corporate partners need, maybe gatekeeper or translator or dolmetscher is not a bad analogy, because also to make all these programs happen required us to have sort of a startup mindset too.
Yes.
It's not easy. It was definitely not easy to make the VERBUND X Accelerator
How
exist.
did you get your startup mindset? What did you do?
Oh boy. Years and years of maybe wisdom, I don't know, or just silliness. I think for me, I mean, I've had a long career in VERBUND. I've been in quite a few stations. I've seen a lot of change in the company, and I've seen, I've worked with more traditional parts of the company and more innovative parts of the company.
Is it okay if I make the joke that in a sense one could think that you would be institutionalized after so many years?
I should probably be. But the authorities have not come to pick me up yet.
Yes.
Please don't pick me up, authorities.
Anyways, but you managed somehow to break through and also to create your own, make space for your own vision and
right. I think
ideas,
it was,
which is very entrepreneurial, which is not typical for a corporate.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
I think that's a compliment.
It is.
Yeah, wow.
It is.
Okay.
You can make a mark in the calendar.
Fine, I'll take it. Lord knows we all need support. Look, I think it was just there was always activities going on in VERBUND regarding startups, or they had been increasing in the years before we started the accelerator program in 2020. There was an opportunity there. The problem that we had was that there was no transparency. Okay. There was no lighthouse. There was no central organizing concept of how VERBUND would work with startup companies and have an engagement program and have a way to really make a service out of it. And I think the service orientation is very important. And of course, it makes complete sense to, if you have those kinds of programs, to consider venture capital as well. They work very well together. They do have an important role to play. So there was a time and a space where that was possible in the company to work on these ideas with some other colleagues, and we managed it.
Congrats. And you have achieved it.
I hope we continue to manage it.
I wonder, back then when you were making these kind of decisions that you want to, develop your own way of collaborating with innovators, with startups, which are kind of like external to your organization, why didn't you go to one of the big service providers, like, the big acceleration programs who have this access to companies from all over the world? Why did you decide to build it your own? And on top of that, make it available for other corporate leaders or corporate partners. What was how did you decide, not to buy, but actually to build it yourself?
Buy or build, option.
Yeah.
We learned from them. I mean, and actually there was a period of time in the very beginning of this where we were collaborating with other larger programs that were doing acceleration. Shout out to my friends and colleagues at EDP in Lisbon, Portuguese utility company. I think we learned a lot from them, and we still are very good partners with them as a result. We also looked at these other bigger names that you mentioned. I won't shout out to any of them, but I think they know who they are. And we had discussions with whether or not to make this decision. I think in the end, we wanted to have more ownership and be able to steer what we were doing, to make it more, let's say, authentic and available to our company itself, and then to really, I think, offer this platform to other innovatively thinking corporates that wanted to work with us. So I think that's how it came. Of course, things like how much did it cost, or how what is the, could you do this in the long term independently? I think what we also wanted to have was sort of a sense of independence in the program, a sense of agency.
And you approached the topic of venture capital in a similar way when you then decided that you should, include this kind of instrument to your strategy as well?
Venture capital is a little bit of a longer path, but I think we also, again, when we started or sort of rebooted the innovation program in VERBUND in 2019, one of the core components was also to have venture capital. VERBUND Ventures didn't happen until 2022, in part because we had other ideas about how to do it. I mean, one idea was, and this is a case where we did think about looking to work together with large venture capital funds that are operating in Europe.
You can also have it as a service in a sense.
We looked at quite a few of them, and I think in the end, our board and we decided to go to do it on our own to start. That we actually had the resources and the talent to set up our own CVC. And I'm really happy about that choice, obviously. And now we actually still do continue to work with other venture capital funds. VERBUND Ventures does invest as well in funds.
As an LP?
As an LP, yes.
Wow.
And we are invested in a German energy fund called ViennaUp that looks at more early stage energy startups, which I think helps in the role of being a deal sourcing manager, to have really a radar and a map of very earlier stage startups that we don't necessarily have always the capacity to look at. We have this, we know what's coming ahead.
Wow.
Would we consider other LP investments? Possibly, sure.
Yeah. No, it's a very versatile strategy that you have developed, and I didn't know about the LP role. You definitely, I see you're co-investing with other funds, which is actually very normal. You probably kind of like, use these networks to source certain deals, to develop your deal flow. But LP is also an interesting strategy to do that, especially in certain stages, in the early stages where you cannot be always, plugged into the market, plugged into on a certain ecosystem, and you can rely on partners who are in a better position to do that. Wow. Okay. And how did you
Wow, did I surprise you today? Amazing.
Yes, there are certain things that I didn't know. I mean, we've talked about it, but we would always like talk about life, and we're
Yes,
gonna
of
do
course.
like, you know,
exactly.
therapy sessions. And
did you know about VERBUND Ventures? Yes, it's very therapeutic to be an LP there.
But I wonder also something else, because you do have a career in finance, and I'm pretty sure that what you have studied at the university is far from venture capital. So how did you develop your career into VC, and what did you learn along the way? Like, what does it take for you to be a good VC?
Well, I definitely do not have the typical career path, I think, into venture capital.
What is a career? Yeah,
whatever that may be.
Yes.
You can ask ChatGPT afterwards.
Probably studying finance or kind of
sure.
like, you know, business administration or something like this, and then Big Four and
that's
M&A,
one way.
M&A.
You might not end up at VERBUND Ventures after that.
This is how it is in Europe.
Maybe you end up at Sequoia or something. Look, I finance has always been a component of my professional life, by choice. I think it's a very valuable tool to be to understand how businesses work, how finance works to fuel growth, to make things tick, to make things work, and I think it's just an evolution from starting out working on credit portfolios in corporate finance in New York, to trading, to mergers and acquisitions, which I also did for several years at VERBUND, to looking then at more strategic and sustainability topics in my stint in our corporate strategy department. And then I think applying all of that into venture capital makes sense. It's not such a big leap to think about that, of course. Mindset and having that, looking at the startups and how they function and
doesn't it require a bit more people's knowledge, venture capital, especially in the stages that you're investing in the early stages, where it's less of it is a financial instrument, but in order for you to make a decision, you don't look only at the spreadsheets, you also look at the people and their mindset, and I think this is what fascinates me. There is a certain je ne sais quoi of how do you become like a good VC or not, and everyone has their own approach, I guess.
And to be very humble and honest, it remains to be seen if VERBUND Ventures is one of those good VCs that you're talking about. I mean, we are still very in early days. We're still building our portfolio. I think we're still getting better all the time at what we do. But maybe to answer that question. Absolutely. This is a people-centric business. I mean, it's about meeting a lot of people. It's a lot about meeting founders and their teams and seeing their ideas and how they handle our silly questions, or how they view the market, how they respond to the technical experts at our company and other companies. But we can't. The numbers are absolutely critical as well. You have to have a very good combination of those, and being in CVCs definitely made me a better listener.
Okay.
Definitely, and I think that's there is some alchemy to all of this. I mean, I'm sure there are other people out there that will disagree and have done a great job, and will continue to. They have a track record, and they maybe have better instincts, or maybe even better analytical basis than we have, but I think we have a great team. I know we have a great team, and I know the startups that we've invested in and working with, I think all of them are really talented companies, and it's an honor to be part of their process and their growth. So
because we're approaching the end, and I would like to maybe end on a high note.
This was low? Okay. All right.
Even a high note, more aspirational. So we started with this. So sustainability is also your personal belief and also your personal mission. You want to leave the planet better than you found it. How would you know that you've done that one day? What would be the markers that you would see?
Well, maybe just step back as far as a belief or a core principle. don't think we can live lives without, any of us, without having some awareness of how we interact in the larger systems in the world, ecological and so on.
Well, there are enough people who.
I understood. I know quite. I know quite.
I prefer not to be aware of that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that's a choice. And I think why I choose this, or maybe to answer your question. I mean, that I think kind of boils down to, the quality of life that the next generations have. As I mentioned before, my kids, if I can truly look at them in the eye someday when they're much more aware of Papa's job or about that, if they see a noticeable change, if we do see that, we're not building too many rocket ships to Mars by the time in the next decades that planet Earth is still home base as it should be, and that there's not too much the impacts of, say, going over all these planetary boundaries that we have are being worked on, and that that there isn't. I'm probably getting a little bit too broad based. I think what are the real indicators of it? That's tricky, but I think we'll know if, from, let's say, sort of the overall quality of life of people, their happiness, these are all connected to the health of the planet and I think our own health as human beings. So there's plenty of indicators out there. There's plenty of things of knowing.
The way that I see it is that the planet will adapt. I mean, the planet...
That's right.
Actually,
Sure.
It's us putting ourselves in danger. I think the planet will be fine.
I think the question is how do we adapt to these things, and how do we not always shoot ourselves in the foot on things that can be solved.
I think it's much more opportunistic than we make it look like. I mean, we talk about the planet and we talk about regenerative futures and regenerative business models and so on and so forth. But
Right.
in the end, it's us that we are in danger. Planet Earth will find and adapt its system and ecosystem even without us.
Yeah, I mean, again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, it is also one of my personal motivators or goals that I would like to leave some kind of like a footprint behind me that is positive. And the more I think about it, the more I'm trying to kind of like build my life around that, the more I understand that it's very hard to judge what is value, what is positive, what is progress, and what is exactly the opposite. Because if you look at it through the different lenses of time, you can interpret it also in a different way. And that's why I'm asking people like you who maybe have found some kind of like an answer at least for themselves.
Before we started this lovely podcast, we were having one interesting conversation, which is, what is the most important relationship you have in your whole life? And that is with yourself.
Yeah.
And, that's the one that you can control the most. And I think the question that you're asking yourself is, when there is that day in the distant future where you're looking back and it's time to figure out the answer to what happens to us on the other side, you're going to have that confrontation, or you'll have that reflection with yourself. What did I do? Did I give a shit? Did I try? Did I try to make this positive impact? And there's lots of ways to do it. And if it's from a perspective of sustainability or looking at the impacts of how our lives are on other people, I think, if you're sitting there without regrets, maybe you did something. Maybe you achieved what you were hoping for.
Yeah, maybe. And I think it's almost impossible to end without regrets. I think the journey starts when you start giving a shit. I think this is where you make most of the difference. Like when you care, when you're involved, when you're engaged.
Sure.
When you commit. And then from there, you kind of like figure it out. And it's always like a trial and error. And sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes your footprint will be positive, sometimes it will be negative. And I don't know who is going to draw the total at the end. But I think now from today's wisdom that I have, it's good to give a shit, to care about something. Yeah. And not to live,
will that be the headline of this podcast then? Giving shit to Edward Feltmann.
For this podcast, I would suggest that we pick a line that you said, not me.
Okay.
Once you invite me to your podcast, you can
oh boy,
you can use my lines.
Okay.
Maybe that's the next project that you should actually take on.
Hello. As a matter of fact, I do believe that we will be starting a podcast at VERBUND. I'm not joking.
I'm happy to brainstorm on that.
There might be someone different sitting in this chair though when you get interviewed, but we'll see.
Looking forward to that. It would be great to change the roles. Edward, I'm very happy that we did this podcast. I'm a bit sad that we had to do it in Vienna, that we needed to come to you, because I'm still looking forward to hosting you in Sofia. So you owe me a visit next time.
It's still on my list.
Yes.
It's definitely on my list.
And looking forward to your own personal, how do you call it, like calculation. Was it a successful endeavor? Let's start with VERBUND Ventures and maybe the rest that you're planning to do this live.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and we can then compare notes. Not the results. I'm not competing with you on the results. It's going to be hard.
Oh, you're too kind.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure to see you, and it was really nice to have this conversation. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope your listeners also know, if they want to know more about what we're doing, that we're easily findable. VERBUNDX.com and all these other things that I don't need to talk about. But
yes, we will probably tag you everywhere, and VERBUND, and it. Yes.
Okay.
Maybe we will also complete a bit your pipeline. We don't know. Let's see how many innovators resonate with what you were saying.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive Podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.